Milt Clark dragged one sleeve over his wet forehead, tossed the pliers among the scattered array of tools in a corner of the garage, and rolled a cigarette. "Guess I'm as dumb as that vulture up there," he said to the kid Johnny. The gangling 17-year-old in faded jeans shook his head. "Weans call them buzzards, and they ain't dumb. Something's dead down back of Slater's, I reckon." It was almost sundown. Cypress Creek sweltered in breathless warmth. The small Florida town with its single main street seemed unusually deserted, waiting in sinister expectancy. "Listen, Milt, just 'cause you're from some big city up north and never had no steady job or trade or nothing, you're doing swell. Got a place to board up at Abbott's and folks are beginning to cotton to you." "They what?" Milt said. "They're beginning to like you. You ain't gonna leave, are you?" There was a quality of perpetual restlessness about him. He looked at the swamp's dim outline through the open rear of the garage, live oaks with their moss plumes stirring in the evening breeze, the rustling palmetto. "I don't know," he said slowly. He unbuttoned his greasy coveralls and stripped them off. "If it wasn't for you, Johnny, old Pringle would fire me. I just don't have the knack. You do all the work." Johnny frowned. "Shucks, I don't either. If we had any money, you and me could open a garage of our own." Milt picked up a sack of groceries. "I got these for Ma Abbott. Now I'm broke again. This ain't no job, kid. Old Pringle doles out my pay like it was for charity." "Maybe you could get a job as deputy for Sheriff Blaine. He and some of the men are still hunting that ape-man that got away from Halleck Circus." Milt shook his head. He was remembering how Blaine had accused him of encouraging Joe Abbott to drink. It wasn't true. He told Blaine off that day and got cuffed around plenty. "You know how I feel about Blaine," he said shortly. "He thinks he's tough when he's got a gun on his hip." It burned him up all the more as he thought of what a good friend Joe Abbott really was. Bleary Joe, who brought him home to be a star boarder even when he couldn't pay a dime some weeks to Ma, who took in washing and waited for the day Joe would stop drinking. "Hey!" Johnny interrupted his thoughts. "Something's wrong. Listen." The sound carried sharply on the warm air. A woman's scream. He and Johnny stared at each other. Johnny's mouth hung open. "Maybe that ape-man circled in from the swamp." He ran out back, peering. "Come on, Milt." His voice was high-pitched, trembling. "It's a crowd gathering back at Slater's at the edge of the woods. Come on." Milt hung onto his package of groceries and followed the kid's flying heels. A hill slanting downward beyond Slater's two-storied house lent momentum to pounding feet. Beyond a rickety shed in a small open glade, a growing cluster of people stared silently. They drew close and saw the body hanging on a pitchfork. The 4 tines emerged through the back, embedded in a large pine tree. "Moss Gerhard," Johnny breathed, his face white. "He wasn't too bad a guy. Even if he did get Joe Abbott drunk all the time, you knew him, Milt." Women in the growing crowd shuddered and averted their faces. Some gathered enough courage to peek through their fingers. Reverend Bouth laid hold of the pitchfork, tugging and pulling, with no effect. He stepped back, lifted his eyes to the sky where the vulture wheeled. "Dear Lord," he said, "no man dwelling in Cypress Creek could be guilty of such a sin as this." "That ape-man, you mean?" a tall, gaunt farmer shouted. "It's strong enough to do that. Probably seen men handling pitchforks all its life in a circus." "Aren't you going to say a word for Moss there?" an old woman quavered. Reverend Bouth looked over the top of his glasses at the intrusion. "I was coming to that," he replied severely. He glanced at the tree, lifted his eyes again, and complied with a short prayer. "Now you got to ring the bell," Mrs. Parker insisted, tugging at his arm. "My man's out helping search the swamp. I won't stay alone in the house tonight neither. You ring the church bell and get him in here, Reverend Bouth." An excited murmur rose from other women in the group. The Reverend waved his thin hands. "The sheriff has to be notified. We'll post a guard." He frowned, looked over the few men present. All except Milt averted their eyes. He was staring at the handle of the pitchfork. Mrs. Parker, who for all her 190 pounds weight, carried herself with dignity, sniffed loudly. "A fine lot. It takes nerve to stay down here in the dark with—" She lost confidence, and her voice dwindled. They all looked at the pine tree. "That's so." "It's getting dark," Reverend Bouth agreed hastily. "We best go." Johnny started to follow the rest, paused. "What you looking at, Milt?" Milt handed him the groceries. "Here, hold these a minute." He went up and laid hold of the pitchfork handle. "Hey!" Johnny whispered, aghast. Milt jerked, but the tines didn't budge. The Reverend hadn't been faking. You remember that kid, he said. No man could jab a pitchfork that hard in a tree, let alone through a man's body, too. That ape-man must be a whopper, Johnny breathed. Milt looked at him sharply. You mean you've never seen it? I thought you hung around a lot out at Halleck's winter quarters. Yes, but I never seen Mo, or that's what they call the ape-man that's got away. Where did they keep him? Johnny shrugged. Moss Gerhard had charge of him. Just got the job a few days ago then, Mo escaped. I don't know what kind of a cage they kept him in. An ape-man is really a gorilla, ain't it? Guess so, Milt replied. I'll take those groceries. Joe's been drinking probably, and I better get out to the house and see if Ma's all right. Let's get out of here, Johnny agreed fervently. There's a lake down back of these woods, and that thing may be lurking around. Milt touched the pitchfork again, fingered the end of the handle. Then he turned abruptly and followed Johnny. You go on to the garage. It's getting late. I'm going home. The church bell began tolling as Milt picked his way through the gloom, covering the 2 long blocks to Abbott's place. This would bring everybody on the run. They'd probably band together there for protection once the news of this outrage spread. In the darkness, he made out the blurred outline of the chinaberry tree that stood in the front yard and turned up the path that skirted around back. The house reeked of gin. Joe Abbott lay on the kitchen floor. Ma Abbott leaned over a wash tub, slowly, methodically bending up and down. Milt shook his head, feeling a sudden lump in his throat. It was always like this. Nothing good ever really happened to the Abbotts. He walked in through the open screen door, twisting a limp cigarette to the other corner of his mouth. It's hot, he remarked, dumping the sack of groceries on the table that stood in the center of the room. Shut the screen, she reminded him. And don't tell me that the window ain't got none. Joe's gonna fix it Sunday for sure. Milt smiled wryly. You get drunk and start cussing you again? She sighed and rested her elbows on the edge of the tub. He don't mean nothing. He's good to me when he's sober. I'd rather have a man like that than the other way around, wouldn't you? How should I know? Milt knelt by the older man and slapped the lined, sodden face. Joe Abbott mumbled incoherently and turned over, with his face against the wall. Leave him alone, Milt. It's cooler there than in the bedroom. What's doing downtown? I heard the bell ringing. You getting the fidgets again, or are you gonna stay on with us? He dragged deeply on his cigarette and snipped it at the sink, wondering how to tell her. Finally, he just blurted it out. Someone stuck a pitchfork in Moss Gerhard, pinned him to that big pine down back of Slater's. A wet lump of clothing slipped from Ma's grasp. She turned. Moss Gerhard? You mean that big roustabout? The one that always loafed around the courthouse steps? Yeah. Everyone in Cyrus Creek is scared silly. There ain't a soul on the streets, now that it's dark. You saw him? Sure I saw him. A muscle jumped in Milt's cheek. He went over and poured himself a drink of water, gazing at the dirty glass. If I was smart, I'd clear out of Florida. At least this part of it. These swamps around here give me the creeps. Moss Gerhard, she whispered. Who would do a thing like that? He was a louse, but he lacked kids. I say any man who lacks kids, everyone thinks that ape got away from Halleck's did it. She dried her hands on her apron, swift, agitated movements. I bet that's it. I said that Bliss Halleck would bring bad luck with him when he bought a circus to winter here. He took up good farmland. He's always buying land when he can grab it cheap. Who told you that? She gestured toward Abbott. Ask him. Bliss got him drunk last week and almost bought all our land. When Joe sobered up, he got mad. Joe knows this land is going to bring good prices someday. Don't you talk Halleck to me. All he's got that circus is freaks. Maybe he let that ape loose just to scare people into selling out cheap. Milt looked at her, eyes narrowing. Joe tell you that too? Of course not, I just thought of it. Maybe you better not think so much. They gazed at each other, and the insects looped and darted around the yellow globe above the sink. It flickered and went out. Milt! Her voice fluttered weakly. Her heavy steps blundered around the room. The table creaked and a tin pan bounced on the floor, sending tinny reverberations through the blackness that slowly died away. Stand still, Milt growled. Get away from the window, I can't see. Lights are out all over town. Milt, I haven't been near the window. I'm by the wash tub, I think. Don't move, Ma. Someone must have come in. But he was moving, groping blindly. His hand found the table, slid open the drawer. Spoons, forks, knives. The carving knife, bone-handled with a heavy blade. As he brought it out, the shape hit him, engulfing him, driving him back. He stabbed outward viciously. There was a tearing sound, and his head cracked against the wall. Hard. Fragmentary thoughts swam dizzily in a curtain of blackness before his eyes, sharp-etched pictures, each a distinct portrait of past events, like the day he bummed into Cypress Creek. The kid, Johnny Lee, who for some reason salvaged him out of the pool hall, showed him a few things about tinkering with motors and got him a precarious job at Pringle's garage. Sheriff Blaine's heavy-jowled face hung before him, sneering. He was half afraid of Blaine. Halleck, a big shot, always running around in city clothes, owning fine cars, houses, and barns. And now he was sitting up, fingering his matted black hair. Something that must have been blood came away on his fingers from an open cut, where his head had collided with the wall, and he remembered the thing in the kitchen. A pinpoint of light wavered before his eyes, grew larger. Ma had a candle lit. She was kneeling by his side, her face 1,000 years old.
"Please, Milt, wake up. How long you been going on like that?"
He whispered.
"You all right, Ma? Not hurt?" "What was it? You were fighting with something."
"I don't know." He climbed to his feet. "What happened after I blanked out?" She licked her lips, holding the flickering candle with both hands.
"There was a growling sound. I thought you were surely killed."
Her eyes went over the kitchen, a shambles, table overturned, broken dishes. Abbott's quiet form by the wall. Milt found the knife, picked it up, and righted the table. A lot of good he was with a knife. He threw it in the drawer, looked at Ma, and saw her trembling. "Give me the candle before you drop it," he commanded. He melted wax on the wooden tabletop, sticking the candle upright.
"This once, I'm glad Joe's drunk," Ma quavered. "Listen, Milt, we've got to let the sheriff know that ape's hiding around. I'll light more candles and get Joe to bed."
Milt crouched beside Joe and turned him over, staring unbelievingly at the wide-open eyes. The man's throat was covered with welts. He was dead. Strangled.
Looks like there's skullduggery and mystery afoot. It's always fun to start a new series, and as we proceed with this one, I want to say a huge thank you to all of these amazing people whose names you see on screen who made it all possible, particularly Andre D, Break System BSZ, Xana Zira, Zachary Snowden-Smith, and Michael Fattori. If you want to see your own name up here, it's as little as $1 a month, and there's all kinds of other cool Patreon bonuses. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and thanks for being you.